One June morning, the Wilson family mansion in the quiet, upscale neighborhood of Greenwich, Connecticut, was bustling earlier than usual. Two luxury cars were neatly parked in front of the entrance. "Rachel, did you eat your breakfast properly?" Patricia, with her graying short hair, called out to the pregnant woman sitting on the living room sofa. She was wearing an elegant designer dress. The pregnant woman was Rachel Wilson, her daughter-in-law. "Yes, I had decaf coffee and toast," Rachel answered, lightly brushing back her long brown hair. Despite being 8 months pregnant with a large belly, she maintained her gentle smile. Working as a real estate agent handling luxury properties, she looked perfect in her simple yet high-quality maternity dress. "Oh, is that all? You need to eat more. For the baby's sake." Patricia's words seemed warm on the surface. However, there appeared to be something cold and elusive lurking in her eyes. "Mom, is Tommy's lunch ready?" Jennifer, Patricia's daughter, came rushing down the stairs, her blonde bob swaying. Working part-time in an office job, she had returned to her parents' home with her 6-year-old son Tommy after her divorce 3 years ago. "Of course. I made yours too." Patricia stood up and pointed to 2 lunch boxes on the kitchen counter. "Thanks, but I have fertility treatment appointments after the gym today." Jennifer's voice trailed off. She suddenly fell silent, as if conscious of Rachel's presence. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. "Auntie." Breaking through the heavy atmosphere, Tommy's energetic voice echoed from upstairs. The lively boy with light brown hair ran up to Rachel. "Is the baby coming yet?" Tommy asked innocently. Rachel smiled gently and replied, "Soon. Maybe in about a month." Actually, starting today, Rachel was going to stay temporarily at her mother-in-law's house. This was because of renovation work at her new home, and because her husband Michael was away on a business trip to Seattle. Michael had achieved success as an executive at an IT company, earning over $150,000 annually. Their new home was being fitted with the latest smart home system, with everything from surveillance cameras to smart locks manageable through smartphones. Being thoughtful of his wife, he had made this arrangement out of concern for leaving Rachel alone during her pregnancy. However, Rachel had a slight uneasiness. The atmosphere in this house seemed to be gradually taking on a strange quality. Particularly Patricia's behavior seemed somehow different from usual. Though she was known for her dedication to charity work and leadership in the local women's association, this morning there seemed to be some other emotion lurking behind her smile. Rachel quietly sighed. With her high-risk pregnancy, she wanted to maintain peace of mind and body. Having experienced miscarriage before, her doctor had specifically advised her to rest. In the Wilsons' spacious living room, Rachel sat on the soft British-made sofa, reading a book about managing morning sickness. Her movements when turning pages were careful, mindful of her large belly, trying to move as little as possible. Occasionally, she would smile gently when feeling the baby move. From the kitchen came the sounds of Patricia preparing lunch. The sound of a knife chopping carrots, the aroma of simmering chicken soup. On the surface, it seemed like an ordinary peaceful domestic scene. "Rachel, lunch is chicken soup. I heard it's good for morning sickness." Patricia's voice carried an oddly emphasized kindness, like a veil hiding her true emotions. "Thank you, Patricia. I'm sorry for the trouble." "Don't worry about it. You're nurturing a precious life right now." There was a hint of sarcasm in the last part of those words. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine for a moment, but she told herself she was reading too much into it. Jennifer was vacuuming. The somewhat aggressive noise echoed throughout the room, seeming to grate on nerves more than necessary. Her movements seemed frantic, pushing the vacuum more roughly than usual. The occasional glances she cast toward Rachel contained inexplicable emotions. From upstairs came the occasional sound of Tommy playing. The innocent childlike sounds seemed to create a discordant note in this strange atmosphere. "Rachel, are you feeling all right?" Patricia appeared in the living room again. In her hand was an unused dishcloth. It was unthinkable for her, usually so particular about cleanliness, to bring a kitchen cloth into the living room. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a little." Before Rachel could finish her sentence, heavy footsteps began thundering from upstairs. The thump-thump sound came down the stairs. Patricia froze for a moment, and Jennifer turned off the vacuum. "Auntie!" Tommy's voice rang out. As he ran down the stairs, he headed straight for Rachel. His expression showed an unusual excitement, different from his normal innocence. "The baby? Is it coming yet? When will it come out?" Firing questions in rapid succession, Tommy approached Rachel's belly. Normally, Patricia or Jennifer would have stopped such behavior. However, both women were watching the scene with an eerily quiet demeanor. "Hey, it's going to be my cousin, right? I can't wait to meet them." Tommy's voice grew increasingly excited. Rachel felt uneasy and tried to close her book and stand up. However, due to her large belly, her movements were much slower than usual. "Tommy, be careful." Before Rachel's warning could sound, the situation suddenly changed. Tommy suddenly jumped forcefully onto the sofa. "Baby, come out now." Shouting energetically, Tommy leaped toward Rachel's belly. Rachel screamed. After a sharp pain, she felt warm liquid flowing. Her water had broken. The blood drained from Rachel's face. But even more shocking was Patricia and Jennifer's reaction at that moment. Both of them simultaneously began to show eerie smiles. "Oh my, how unfortunate," Patricia's voice carried obvious artifice. "The baby might really come out now." Jennifer wore a chilling smile. Neither of them made any move to help Rachel. Though Tommy was laughing at first, he soon seemed to sense the abnormality of the situation and began to show a confused expression. "Auntie, are you okay?" Tommy raised his voice in genuine concern. However, seeing his mother Jennifer's abnormal laughter deepened his confusion. Struck by severe abdominal pain, Rachel desperately reached for her handbag. Muttering, "Michael, ambulance." She searched for her smartphone. However, before her hand could reach the phone, Jennifer quickly approached. "You won't be needing this." With Jennifer's cold voice, Rachel's smartphone was thrown against the wall, shattering with a crash. The sound was like Rachel's hopes being shattered to pieces. "We won't let you contact anyone," Patricia's voice rang out, cold as ice. "How dare you try to give birth in this house?" Her voice erupted with emotions long suppressed. A young, healthy woman getting pregnant so easily. Patricia's eyes had now completely lost their reason. Rachel collapsed to the floor, feeling the hopelessness of the situation along with increasing contractions. She couldn't call for help. She had no allies. Her baby's safety was threatened. Patricia and Jennifer surrounded the fallen Rachel, wearing sinister smiles. In the corner of the room, Tommy was crying with a frightened expression. The cold air blowing from the air conditioner now felt like icy needles against Rachel's skin. The sunlight filtering through the curtains seemed like light from another world. The ticking of the clock echoed unusually loudly, synchronizing with her heartbeat. While enduring waves of contractions, Rachel desperately tried to assess the situation. The bleeding since her water broke was minimal, but irregular contractions were gradually becoming stronger. Cold sweat dripped from her forehead, and her whole body was trembling. "It was right not to call for help," Patricia declared triumphantly. Her voice was so cruel it was hard to believe it belonged to the usually mild-mannered Women's Association leader. "Even if we called an ambulance, it wouldn't arrive in time. This child will be born in this house." Her eyes glowed with an unusual light. It was as if the madness she had hidden for years was now suddenly unleashed. "Why, how could you?" To Rachel's trembling voice, Jennifer answered. "Why? You wouldn't understand. How much we've..." Her voice broke off. At that moment, her expression showed deep pain. "Fertility treatments, failing again and again, and yet you..." Jennifer's voice was filled with hatred. All her pain from failed fertility treatments, the trauma of divorce, and jealousy toward Rachel were erupting at once. "Mom!" Tommy's small voice rang out. He was clearly terrified by his mother's transformation. "Tommy, go upstairs." At Patricia's commanding tone, Tommy started toward the stairs, trembling. But then it happened. Rachel screamed with an intense contraction. As if in response to her voice, suddenly from a small speaker in the corner of the room, an angry shout rang out. "What the hell are you doing to my wife?" It was Michael's voice. Patricia and Jennifer froze in their tracks. The surveillance camera, no way. Jennifer looked up at the ceiling with a pale face, and sure enough, there was a small surveillance camera installed. When renovating their new home, Michael had proposed installing them in his mother-in-law's house too, and Patricia had outwardly agreed readily. "Don't you dare touch her. I've called the police and ambulance." Michael's voice contained a fury they had never heard before. During his business meeting in Seattle, he had received an alert notification on his smartphone and immediately acted after checking the surveillance camera footage. "No, it can't be." Patricia's voice trembled. The plan should have been perfect. However, that plan was now crumbling due to modern technology. The sound of sirens could be heard in the distance. "We have to run." Jennifer started running toward the entrance. However, the next moment, the sound of the smart lock automatically engaging echoed. Michael had locked it remotely. "Mom. I'm scared." Tommy's sobbing voice. Patricia seemed to come to her senses and tried to run to her son. But it was already too late. Voices sounded from the entrance, followed by the sound of the door being broken down. Flashlight beams penetrated the room. Police officers burst in. Patricia and Jennifer collapsed where they stood. Tommy was taken into protective custody by one of the officers and immediately led to another room. Paramedics in white uniforms rushed to Rachel's side. They began checking her vitals with practiced movements. Rachel shed tears of relief at the paramedic's calm voice. How much time had passed? Though it had only been about 15 minutes, to her it felt like an eternity. Just before being loaded into the ambulance, Michael's voice sounded from the speaker again. This time, the anger was gone, replaced by a voice full of deep love. "I'm on my way. Wait for me at the hospital." The ambulance siren wailed again. Amidst the rotating lights of police cars, Rachel was carried on a stretcher to the ambulance. In the corner of her vision, she could see Patricia and Jennifer being led out in handcuffs. The obstetric emergency room at Regional Medical Center was suddenly filled with tension before noon. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around Rachel's bed. The fetal heartbeat from the monitor echoed regularly throughout the room. "Mrs. Wilson, the fetus is stable," Dr. Sarah Matthews announced while checking the monitor values. Her white coat swaying, she efficiently proceeded with necessary treatments. "There's a risk of premature birth, but we can control it with medication for now. You'll need to rest for a while." Rachel nodded slightly at those words. Though her body was still trembling, just looking up at the hospital's impersonal white ceiling gave her a sense of relief from the nightmarish time in that house. The treatment room door burst open, and Michael rushed in. Having returned urgently from Seattle in a company helicopter, his face still showed raw agitation. "The baby, are you both okay?" "We're safe," Rachel answered with a faint smile. Michael gently held his wife's hand and softly kissed her forehead. "I'm so glad I installed those cameras." At that moment, the room's door opened again, and two detectives entered. They were Detective John Miller and his partner Sarah Cooper from the Greenwich Police Department. "Mrs. Wilson, are you feeling more settled now?" Detective Miller spoke quietly. Though his manner was gentle, his eyes held a sharp light. "Yes. I'm all right." "Then, could you tell us what happened, as much as you're able?" A nurse prepared a tablet for recording, and the recording of Rachel's testimony began. She explained the events of that morning one by one, trying to control her trembling voice, the sense that something was off about Patricia, Jennifer's unnatural behavior, and the moment Tommy jumped at her. "Did you notice anything unusual about them before the incident?" Detective Cooper continued questioning while taking notes in her specialized notebook. "Yes, especially recently, Patricia's behavior had changed." Rachel recalled one by one the small oddities she had noticed. Subtle sarcastic remarks, subtle changes in expression, unnatural attentiveness. Looking back now, they were all clear warning signs. Meanwhile, at the Greenwich Police Department, the investigation of the scene was proceeding rapidly. "We've secured the surveillance camera footage," a young police officer, along with a digital equipment specialist, was analyzing the footage recorded by the cameras. Patricia and Jennifer's conversations, unnatural movements, and the entire incident were clearly recorded. Their social media posting history is also concerning. Detective Cooper was carefully investigating Patricia's social media accounts. On the surface, there were numerous posts about charitable activities. However, interspersed between them were words suggesting subtle jealousy and hatred. This tendency had become particularly pronounced since Rachel's pregnancy was announced. "We're also gathering testimonies from Women's Association members," Detective Miller reported while sealing evidence. Multiple members of the Women's Association had testified about Patricia's recent unusual behavior. An unnatural interest in pregnant women at charity events. Occasional comments revealing a distorted view of motherhood. "The housekeeper's testimony is interesting," Detective Cooper opened a file. The housekeeper, who came to the Wilson house twice a week, had witnessed Patricia and Jennifer secretly discussing something. The next day, in the interrogation room, Patricia finally began to speak under the cold lighting. "In my 20s. I underwent fertility treatments many times." Her voice had lost its former dignity. "For 7 years. I went to the hospital every month, got injections, kept taking medicine. But my body kept refusing to conceive a child. That memory was etched as a deep wound in her heart. Michael, who I was finally blessed with, was my everything. I wanted to be involved in every aspect of his life. His children too. I wanted. Her words trailed off. The interrogation room's recorder meticulously recorded her sighs. In another room, Jennifer was also being interrogated. Mother knew about my fertility treatments. I too failed many times. Tears flowed from her eyes. Rachel getting pregnant so easily, and progressing so smoothly, we couldn't bear it. The testimony continued. The details of the plan were revealed. Patricia and Jennifer had been secretly meeting and discussing for several weeks. Using Tommy's innocent behavior was also part of the plan. But we never expected the surveillance cameras. Jennifer's voice trembled. Modern technology had completely exposed their distorted plan. The investigation progressed further, revealing new facts one after another. Patricia's history of psychiatric treatment. The psychological trauma from fertility treatments in her youth. The truth about Jennifer's divorce: infertility was actually the cause of her separation from her husband. And traces of previous harassment emerged. Minor harassment toward Rachel, intentional infliction of psychological stress. Everything had been recorded. A week later, the formal charges were decided. The charges against Patricia and Jennifer were serious. Assault, unlawful confinement, property damage, and conspiracy. The prosecution was preparing to seek severe sentences. The bail application has been denied, Detective Miller reported to Rachel, who was recovering in the hospital. A restraining order has also been issued by the court. They won't be able to approach you for the foreseeable future. Michael nodded silently while holding his wife's hand. The incident shocked the local community. The Women's Association held an emergency meeting and decided to dismiss Patricia from her position as chairwoman. The local community continued to discuss the incident repeatedly. A particularly difficult issue was Tommy's custody. As his mother Jennifer faced the possibility of a prison sentence, discussions including the Child Welfare Department had begun about his guardianship. In a hospital room, Rachel gazed out the window. The summer sunlight still shone warmly as before. The baby in her womb had survived the events of that day and continued to grow healthily. "We'll think about the future one step at a time," Michael said, and Rachel quietly nodded. This incident had posed deep questions about the nature of family to them. What are true family bonds that transcend hatred and obsession? Finding that answer wouldn't be easy. Still, they had to move forward one step at a time. 3 months after the incident, Rachel sat in a rocking chair, gently gazing at her baby dozing in her arms. Emma had been born right on schedule and was growing beautifully. She had sculpted, delicate features, black eyes like Michael's, and soft hairline like Rachel's. "She really is an angel," Michael said, gently kissing his daughter's cheek after returning from work. Since Emma's birth, he had made a point of limiting overtime and trying to return home as early as possible. He had even changed all his Seattle business trips to online meetings. Soft evening sunlight streamed into the living room of their new home. The smart home system was still in place, but now it served purely for security. Photos celebrating Emma's birth adorned the walls, and baby shower gifts lined the shelves. A peaceful domestic atmosphere enveloped the entire room. Meanwhile, Patricia's life had undergone significant changes. At trial, taking into account mitigating circumstances, she received a 3-year suspended sentence. Naturally, she was asked to resign from her position as chairwoman of the Women's Association. Once a star of the social scene, she now lived a reclusive life at home. However, the therapy she had begun on her psychiatrist's recommendation was slowly showing results. The trauma of fertility treatments she had carried for years and her obsession with a distorted sense of motherhood, she was now facing these issues head-on. "Another letter came from your mother," Rachel told Michael one evening. Patricia's letters of apology arrived almost weekly. However, feeling not yet emotionally ready, Rachel kept them unopened in a special box. Jennifer's prison sentence was heavier than expected. 1 year in prison. The judge cited the premeditated nature of the crime and insufficient remorse. However, this became an opportunity for her to reassess her life. In the prison counseling program, Jennifer had begun confronting her issues. Her obsession with fertility treatments, dependence on her mother, and twisted jealousy. She was slowly beginning to understand how these had driven her to the edge. Tommy's situation became the most complex issue. "I want to meet baby Emma." Tommy would occasionally say such things during his child psychology counseling sessions. He was now living with his paternal grandmother. He looked forward to his monthly supervised visits with Rachel, permitted under child welfare supervision. "Tommy, Emma is your cousin. There will definitely come a day when you can meet her," Rachel had promised Tommy. His pure eyes held no guilt. It was the adult's responsibility to minimize the impact of the incident and watch over his healthy development. Time passed, and Emma's first birthday was approaching. "What should we do about the party preparations?" Michael carefully asked Rachel. This was more than just a consultation about a birthday party. Should they take a step toward mending relationships, or was it still too soon? Rachel thought deeply. Certainly, the terror of that day wouldn't easily fade. However, harboring hatred forever wouldn't be good for Emma either. "Let's invite Tommy. And I think I'll write a reply to Patricia's letters." Michael quietly nodded at her decision. It was a path that needed to be taken carefully and gradually. They would rebuild relationships step by step, with professional support. Creating a new family dynamic isn't easy. However, every time Rachel saw Emma smile, she felt certain. Letting go of hatred and choosing the path of understanding and forgiveness was the true victory. Outside the window, the autumn twilight was deepening. Emma reached out her tiny hand to touch Rachel's cheek. Michael smiled gently at the gesture. With the beginning of a new season, a new chapter in the Wilson family story was quietly opening. Though they might sometimes get hurt and stumble, the story of this family, bound by genuine bonds, would continue on.